There's a woman sitting with a stack of field notebooks, and she can't bring herself to write the sentence she needs to write. She's spent her whole life out here. She knows these animals the way you know your own family, by name, by face, by the sound each one makes coming through the trees. She held some of them as babies. She watched their mothers grow old. And what her own notes are telling her now, in her own handwriting, is something she has no scientific word for. So she reaches for a human one instead. Evil. Her name is Jane Goodall. The year the killing started was 1974, in a stretch of Tanzanian forest called Gombe. And the thing she was struggling to admit, the thing that would take her years to publish, was this. The chimpanzees she loved had spent 4 years hunting down and destroying every last one of their neighbors. Not strangers, not another species. Chimps they'd grown up beside, groomed, shared food with, wrestled with, as juveniles. They found them one at a time. They cornered them, and they killed them. You're about to hear how the gentlest picture science ever painted of our closest relative was torn apart by the animals themselves. A betrayal that split one family into two. A campaign that ran in total silence for 4 years. And an ending so complete that when it was over, an entire community of apes had simply been erased. Welcome to Wild Rain. So do me a favor right now, tap that like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because this only gets darker from here. To feel how hard this landed, you have to go back to the day everyone fell in love with them. Goodall is 26, fresh into the forest along Lake Tanganyika. No formal degree, just a notebook and a stubbornness that bordered on unreasonable. For months, the chimps want nothing to do with her. Then one morning she watches a male she calls David Graybeard do something no textbook said an animal could do. He takes a twig, strips it clean, slides it into a termite mound, and fishes his breakfast out. A tool, made and used by an animal. Her mentor Louis Leakey read the report and fired back a line that went around the world. Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as human. And here's the trap the whole world walked straight into. That one discovery made everybody, scientists included, decide chimps were the good version of us. The innocent cousin. Smart. Sure, but smart in a warm and harmless way. Playful. Gentle. Living proof that whatever was wrong with humanity, we'd caught it from civilization, not from our blood. Goodall handed that story a face without meaning to, because she named them. Flo, the old matriarch everyone adored. Figan, her sharp and ambitious son. Mike, who bluffed his way to the top of the group by banging stolen kerosene cans together until bigger males backed down. These weren't specimens with numbers. They had personalities, rivalries, kids. So the community she studied, the Kasakila group, looked like a little society you could actually root for, which is exactly why nobody saw the crack forming. By the early 70s, something was pulling the group apart. A knot of adult males kept drifting south, spending less and less time with the rest. They traveled as their own unit, patrolled as their own unit, and by 1972 the split was final. One community had become two. The Northerners kept the name Kasakila. The breakaway group in the south got a new one, Kahama. Think about what that actually means. Individuals who had shared everything, who had picked parasites off each other's backs and slept in the same range for years, now stood on opposite sides of an invisible line. And every week the tension across that line got heavier. Goodall wrote later that she didn't recognize the beginning of a war when she was looking right at it. Nobody would have. There was no declaration. Just two groups of old friends who stopped being friends. And then the patrol started. Here's the part that broke the science. The Kasakila males didn't fight when they happened to bump into a rival. They went looking. In squads of 3 to 6, always adult males, they'd slip across the border into Kahama land and go quiet. And I mean quiet. No hoots, no barks, none of the constant chatter chimps make in the forest. They moved slow, froze to listen, checked droppings, sniffed at abandoned sleeping nests, reading the ground like trackers. And when they caught a Kahama male alone, with no way out, they didn't chase him off. They ended him. The first one they got was a male called Goodall. 6 of them fell on him for close to 10 minutes and left him broken in the leaves. Months later they took Day. Then they came for the one that hurt the most. Goliath, the old founder of Kahama. He was pushing 30, teeth worn down, limbs going weak, and by every account, the most peaceable male in the whole forest. Goodall had known him since almost the first day of her research. When the northern males found him, 5 of them beat him for over 18 minutes. Sit with that number, 18 minutes. Long after he'd stopped fighting back, long after he'd stopped moving at all, they kept going. That's not hunger. Hunger is efficient. This was something with heat behind it. And it didn't stop with Goliath. Charlie, Hugh, Sniff. The whole map of Kahama's grown males got crossed off, one name at a time, and the method never changed. Find him alone, block the exit, swarm him. The females who survived got dragged north and beaten into joining the group that had just wiped out their own. The infants that weren't Casaquelas disappeared without a trace. By 1977, there was no Kahama left. Not a scattered few. None. An entire community, gone. Quick thing before we go on, because if this is your first time here, this is exactly the kind of story we tell on this channel. Subscribe, hit the bell, tap the like. It's free and it means the world. All right. Now you could try to explain this away. Territory, food, just survival instinct wearing a nastier coat. And primatology already knew chimps could be violent. It knew about infanticide. It even had records from this same forest of females killing and eating other mothers' babies, something that rattled Goodall so hard she doubted her own data. But this was a different animal entirely, and the whole difference lives in one word: planning. These males didn't react. They initiated. The patrols went out with no provocation to answer for. The victims were picked for weakness, not luck. The attacks ran silent, in a formation that only works if every ape in the group already knows the goal. They understood what they were doing. They understood why. And they held that purpose steady for 4 straight years, until there was no one left to kill. Among humans, that word has a name. It's not a fight. It's not a feud. It's a campaign. A war with a strategy and an objective and a body count that only stops when the other side stops existing. So who runs a war like that? Start with Figan, Flo's son, the one Goodall had watched grow up. He came out of childhood with a gift that had nothing to do with muscle, a feel for alliances, for reading the room, for climbing the ladder through moves a human political operator would recognize instantly. By the time the killing began, Figan sat at the top of the north, and the patrols went out under him, with what looked a lot like his approval. Then there's Humphrey, not a schemer, a wrecking ball. Nearly 40 kilos of muscle, enormous for a chimp, with a temper that kept everyone under him permanently nervous. Humphrey had gone after Figan's crown for years and never taken it. Under normal circumstances, those two were rivals. But there was nothing normal about this. In the war, the schemer and the wrecking ball fought side by side, and together there was no stopping them. 2 males with every reason to hate each other, folding that away for a shared purpose. We have a phrase for that when people do it. Unity against a common enemy. And that's the moment Gombe stops being a nature scene and turns into something else. A political arena. Factions, leaders, strategy, a contested border, and the deliberate erasure of the other side. And then came the detail that shut down every last attempt to keep a safe scientific distance. The killers didn't always just kill. Sometimes they stayed with the bodies, handled them, held up what they'd done. And in at least one case that made it into the record, they ate part of a defeated enemy. Chimps eating chimps wasn't brand new at Gombe, but it had meant infants, inside a group. This was the flesh of a rival taken in war. When this reached the wider world, it went off like a bomb. The 1970s still ran on a hopeful idea that organized violence was something humans had invented, a cultural mistake, a thing you could unlearn. The gentle savage, ruined only by the world around him. Gombe didn't just argue with that idea. It buried it. Our closest relatives, sharing 99% of our DNA, could plan a war, set ambushes, run a strategy, wipe out a rival nation, which meant coordinated violence was never a human invention at all. It was already in the blood, written into a line of primates millions of years before the first city, the first army, the first flag. Which brings us back to that woman and her notebooks. It took Goodall years to publish, and it wasn't caution or politics that slowed her down. It was grief. She wrote that she'd had to tear up everything she thought she understood about who these animals were. Because the ones doing the killing weren't monsters she'd found in the dark. They were Figan. They were the sons of mothers she'd sat beside, individuals she'd watched come into the world, and they were capable of something she could only call evil. When a scientist with 40 years in the field reaches for that word, it isn't a flourish, it's a finding. Later, the primatologist Richard Wrangham gave it a colder frame. He called it the demonic male hypothesis. The idea that this kind of group-on-one violence isn't a malfunction at all, but a strategy that paid off for the ancestors we share with chimps. Kill the rival males and you cut the competition for mates, land, food. When your side has the numbers, the risk to you is almost zero. In the arithmetic of survival, war wins. That's not an excuse. It's a diagnosis, and the gap between those two is the whole point. Because here's what Gombe really showed. Intelligence with no moral brake on it doesn't make an animal gentler. It makes it more efficient at destruction. Chimps don't wage war in spite of being clever. They wage war because they're clever. The same mind that shaped David Greybeard's little twig into a tool is the mind that plans an ambush. The only variable is where you aim it. And we are the sharpest version of that mind ever to walk the earth. So I'll leave the choice with you. Knowing the impulse is that old, that deep, that built-in, do you think it makes us prisoners of our own wiring, or the one animal capable of looking at it and saying no? Tell me in the comments. Gombe doesn't offer any guarantees. It just holds up a mirror. What you do with the face looking back, that part is entirely, uniquely human. Drop the like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.